These are this afternoon's top stories. Medical Chief of Staff says first death is a wake-up call. UN warns Haiti aid response is underfunded and human body parts found scattered in Minneapolis. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Friday, 18th June 2021. I'm Carla Barrage. Medical Chief of Staff at the Joseph N. France General Hospital, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, says he hopes that persons will be more serious about protecting themselves from COVID-19 following the nation's first COVID-related death on Thursday. During a press briefing on Thursday afternoon, Dr. Wilkinson said in order to prevent more deaths, everyone must be serious about taking the necessary precautions.
I want people to wake up and take this thing seriously. We need to unite in this fight against the virus. We understand that we have differences, but we can put our differences aside and have a collective effort in fighting this virus. Otherwise, we will have other deaths.
Dr. Wilkinson said the best tool to fight the spread of the virus and lessen its impact is to get vaccinated and encourage those who have not yet done so to do so as soon as possible. Individuals in St. Kitts who are currently impacted by a loss of income due to the current state of emergency may be eligible for relief from the government. At Wednesday's COVID-19 briefing by the NEOC, Attorney General Honorable Vincent Byron noted that the government is focused on breaking the current transmission of COVID-19 within the community. He said that an assessment will be made on June 26, 2021 to determine what the best way forward is for the country. This will include the impact of the limited operation period.
The government will consider and look to see what areas we can to support and help those who may feel disadvantaged, but it is a decision that will have to be made by the cabinet. At this point in time, there is no such decision, but we want everyone in St. Kitts and Nevis to support the health fraternity as we try to restrict the movement of the virus.
In the interim, the Attorney General called on all within society to adhere to the guidelines established to slow the community spread of COVID-19. This includes observing the curfew hours between 6 p.m. and 5 a.m., while only moving for essential purposes during the non-curfew hours. Persons must also wear a face mask in public spaces, frequently sanitize hands, and maintain 6 feet physical distance from others. Divisional Commander for District A, Superintendent Cromwell Henry, addressed concerns raised by persons as it pertains to the consumption of alcohol under Statutory Rules and Orders number 24 during his appearance on Policing With You on Thursday. Under SRNO number 24, liquor licenses have been suspended. Superintendent Henry says this does not affect the consumption or the sale of alcohol from establishments such as supermarkets or the brewery. He said, however, that it affects the environment in which alcohol is usually consumed in places such as bars which encourage gathering.
It is not intended to restrict people drinking alcohol, because you could buy a case of alcohol in the supermarket and go home and drink it.
Right.
It's not to restrict the use of alcohol. It is to restrict the type of environment that you get in a bar. You sit down in the bar and you drink the alcohol and you become intoxicated, and then you forget about all the protocols. And so that is the type of environment that fosters the spread of the virus. And we want to restrict that type of activity.
He added that persons can buy alcohol but consume it in the comfort of their own home. And we're moving now to news on the regional scene. The United Nations says there is not enough money to cover this year's humanitarian response plan in Haiti. That is, even though political instability and the coronavirus pandemic have left many more people in need of help. The country is also still trying to recover from a cholera outbreak nearly 10 years ago, which was introduced to the country by UN peacekeepers. Al Jazeera's Kristen Salumi reports.
In Haiti, an impoverished country with densely packed communities and poor sanitation, disease can spread quickly. A surge in coronavirus cases is pushing the 2 main hospitals in the capital of Port-au-Prince to capacity. But international aid to Haiti has been hard for the United Nations to raise since 2010, when UN peacekeepers there introduced cholera to the country.
There's been a funding issue, right? we haven't had the funds that we need.
The source of the cholera epidemic that ultimately claimed 10,000 lives was unclear at first, but was ultimately traced to the inadequate handling of sewage at a Nepalese UN peacekeeping base.
We apologize to the Haitian people.
The Secretary General at the time, Ban Ki-moon, eventually apologized for the UN's handling of the crisis. In a new memoir, he calls it a lasting stain on the UN's reputation. The UN has since spent more than $700 million fighting cholera in Haiti and another $8 million so far in victim-led community development. But a U.S. court ruled that the United Nations could not be sued for damages due to diplomatic immunity, and no victims have ever been directly compensated.
We are not liable legally on this matter, but that does not mean that we are not responsible morally. That's why I did my best to really support Haitian people.
It's completely misleading and manipulative.
International law professor and former UN Special Rapporteur Philip Alston says the UN may have immunity in court, but it does have a responsibility to compensate victims under its own charter.
This is not a question of a moral duty, it's a legal duty. We screwed these people, we've got to pay for it.
In his book, Bond describes lawyers who attempted to get compensation for Haitians who lost loved ones as attempting to extort the UN. Mario Joseph was one of those lawyers.
We need him to repair Haiti to people who the mother killed on cholera, who cannot go to school, cannot have potable waters. That's why it's a heritage of Mr. Ban Ki-moon.
Haiti hasn't had a new case of cholera in 2 years, but the country has yet to recover, with yet another deadly disease on the rise. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, the United Nations.
Antigua and Barbuda and other CARICOM member states are being asked to assist flood-ravaged Guyana. The Caribbean Disaster Management Agency is marshalling the relief effort and is in contact with member states as the situation in several regions of Guyana is dire. Director of the National Office of Disaster Services, Fillmore Mullin, provides an update in this ABS News report.
Director National Office of Disaster Services NODS, Fillmore Mullin, says the ground is very saturated, creating issues in several regions.
While all of them are negatively impacted, severity is greater in regions 1, regions 3, 4, 6, 9, and 10. Those are the areas that are under extreme threat in terms of the amount of water on the ground.
Another challenge, he says, is the number of people displaced isn't reflected in the shelters.
There is a real fear by some people to shelter outside of the official shelters. Some of them are actually in the woods, and that poses another problem. They would not be accessible for any form of relief that comes through from the system.
The NODS director says the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, has started lending assistance to include cots, sanitizer, as well as food and hygiene items. Mullin says there are also impediments to controlling the flooding.
One of the gates that allow them to control floodwaters is significantly, it's in some disrepair and is not able to function. And so that compounds the problem a little more.
He says all regions have not yet been fully assessed, so it is possible there may be deaths. He says animals are stuck in the saturated soil. However, not much can be done since there's no dry area to move them to. Sherilyn Beazer reporting for ABS News.
And on the international scene, unidentified human body parts were discovered in Minneapolis Thursday morning after police officers responded to a report that a person had found a leg. More in this Reuters report.
Police officers in Minneapolis confirmed a series of grisly discoveries on Thursday. Human body parts found in the city's northeast. That's according to police spokesperson John Elder.
At 9:29 this morning, Minneapolis police received a 911 report of possible body parts being found on the 300 block of Main Street Northeast. Officers arrived located the items, and they do in fact appear to be human body parts. And we are treating this as a homicide investigation.
Elder added additional body parts were discovered at another location, but police have been unable to identify the victim. Local media reported critical body parts are still missing, including the victim's head. Although unconfirmed, officials believe the remains to be of an adult white male.
The coronavirus pandemic continues to ravage Latin America. Paraguay is reporting more than 2,000 new daily cases amid a shortage of hospital beds, oxygen, and medicines. But in some other nations, efforts to combat the virus are working. Al Jazeera's Daniel Schremer reports.
Paraguay now has one of the worst per capita death and infection rates anywhere in the world. Hospitals are overstretched.
We begged for them to attend to my mother, but they didn't give us any kind of attention. They only said there was no space at that time because they were overwhelmed with patients.
And even when they can find room, they don't always have sufficient supplies of oxygen and medicines to treat their patients.
Patients are not directly turned away, but when they arrive, we explain to them that there is no longer enough oxygen, so they cannot be given the care they deserve. And yes, unfortunately, for 2 weeks now, patients have been turned away.
Less than 7% of Paraguay's 7.5 million population have been vaccinated. And until more are treated, experts fear the infection rates are only likely to keep rising. The forecast is brighter elsewhere, where vaccination campaigns are more advanced. Here in Argentina, 30% of the population has had at least one jab, with millions more doses scheduled to arrive in the coming weeks. With infection rates gradually falling, there's a perceptible rise of optimism in the air. Tens of thousands of pupils in Buenos Aires province have returned to their classrooms after months of online teaching at home.
We are all happy to be able to come back. We are observing the COVID-19 protocols.
Despite opposition from some, Rio de Janeiro's famous samba schools are also back to prepare for next year's carnival. Brazil's COVID crisis is still far from under control, but after more than a year of inactivity, during which the 2021 carnival was cancelled, many are relieved to be active again, despite the risks.
I'm very happy to be back with the band after such a long time, after a year of being separated, a year without playing the drums. Now I'm the happiest and most fulfilled person in the world.
The pandemic is still, however, preventing some from fulfilling their dreams. In Ecuador, doctors Mavelin and David have postponed their wedding to keep treating COVID-19 patients.
I don't regret it because we've helped many families who can now be with their loved ones.
Both have themselves recovered from the virus and say they'll beat it again, with the whole country watching and waiting to see when they'll finally get married. Daniel Schremer, Al Jazeera, Buenos Aires.
And now for the weather. Present weather is cloudy with haze. Winds are east at 12 to 20 miles per hour with possible gusts up to 30 miles per hour. Seas are 5 to 7 feet. A small craft caution remains in effect. The weather forecast for today and tonight will be partly cloudy and hazy with a 40% or moderate chance of brief passing showers. Sunset today will be at 6:47 p.m. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 5:37 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you for joining us. I'm Carla Berridge.